Hi, this is Dave Stelzl, and I'm in Boston today, and I'm working with a company on their sales training. But I want to make this video because there's an important message I have, and I call this the history of the VAR. And actually, maybe it's not so much the history of the VAR, but it's VARs are almost history. And this message is important if you're a VAR, if you're a reseller, if you're a solution provider of some kind, then you need to listen to this message because this message doesn't seem to be getting out. Over the last 20 years, we've had some tremendous VAR success, reseller success. And in the 80s, things were kind of booming. I mean, the PC was just coming out in the early 80s. And then Novell was also in the market, fiber optic. And so we saw companies coming out like Businessland, CompuCom, Valcom, SolarCom, Intercom, a lot of comms there, big trend there, you can see. Now, we continue on in history because this business commoditized and we saw some kind of the fall of Businessland, Intercom, Valcom, all those companies kind of went out of business or were restructured somehow, bought by somebody, refunded somehow. The point is that when Novell became a commodity, which is exactly what happened to it. Microsoft moved in around that time in the 1992 time frame with a Windows operating system. And so the history continues on with resellers kind of capitalizing on that business, moving into the Windows space and replacing Novell with the Microsoft operating system on the network side. Well, at the same time, we have a number of Unix companies coming around. This is like the 1995 time frame. With Sun Microsystems was booming, and HP Unix, HP UX, and these mid-range computers coming alongside with Oracle and Sybase. And of course, the companies that did Novell weren't able to make the transition. So what happened to them? Well, most of them kind of went out of business. Now, that business grew and grew and grew, and sometime around the year 2000, that business also kind of slid down. That was when the dot-com boom happened, and things started to get more Microsoft-centric, if you remember, which is really a commoditization of that. People started to use Microsoft as a platform for serious applications. Well, what's happened? This is where I need you to pay attention and really focus on what's happening. Because now we're threatened and that business is going down again. See, in 2000, we had unified communication. It was a discontinuous technology. Prior to that, the high availability Unix computing was kind of a discontinuous movement in the industry to move mainframe applications down to a Unix environment. And prior to that, Novell represented somewhat the same thing where people were taking mainframe technology and moving into an open systems environment and using things like AttachMate, if you remember that. Of course, they're still around, but who knows who they are, to access the mainframe through a PC and through a Novell operating system. All of this represented discontinuous innovation, which created an opportunity for a new reseller to grow and evolve and become a business. Now, the manufacturer never really intended the reseller to be that kind of company. They really intended it to be an extension of them playing in a commodity market. So as the manufacturer moves their product to get into a commodity market, meaning they want to capture the big market, they need the reseller to go to market with them. Well, 2000, as I look back over this last decade, the year 2000 is a substantial year. Unified communications becomes a substantial technology and a viable reason for a reseller to form. Well, there hasn't been another one since then. And so those companies that built themselves on unified communications grew and grew and grew and had very strong business plans, but there's not another discontinuous innovation. If we look at what Novell is doing, well, that's kind of gone. If we look at what Sun is doing, well, Oracle just picked them up. Why did Oracle pick up Sun? And then we look at Cisco. Cisco doesn't have a new discontinuous innovation. Cisco has a data center play today. Data center. Data center is not a discontinuous innovation like unified communications was, or like switching was prior to that, or like routing and switching was way before that. Those were all discontinuous innovations that allowed Cisco to grow their business. But all those things are gone. And so if we look at what's happened, I drew a little map here. I'd like to show it to you. Okay? And here it is. And what it shows is that over here we've got high value discontinuous innovation, but there isn't any. And so we have to drop back to consulting. Well, who's going to buy consulting if there's not a discontinuous innovation? Well, some companies will, but if you're not selling the right kind of consulting services, you're in trouble. So that moves you over to here, which is a low value sale, which is a commodity product sale. I'm seeing product deals go down right now at 65, 75% off. Can a reseller make money on that? Absolutely not. The margins are down so thin that we're relying on rebate dollars and JMF for the manufacturer to make us whole. This is ridiculous. A company can't sustain like that. It's prolonging the death of the reseller, but ultimately the reseller goes out of business unless the reseller can deliver product at tremendous discounts. Now, who can afford to do that? Only the very large resellers that the manufacturer agrees to somehow make whole. If you're a mid-sized reseller or a small reseller, you're in trouble. You're not going to be able to do that because you're not going to have enough product sale for companies like Cisco and Hewlett-Packard and IBM and Oracle with Sun or whoever else it is out there to invest enough money in you to keep you afloat. And you don't have a way to get back over here because there's no discontinuous innovation. There's not another unified communications to build your business on. And if you're calling on the mid-market or the SMB market, they're not going to pay for your consulting services because they don't have any money either, particularly because we're in a down economy. So then you're left over here with moving to managed services, some kind of recurring revenue. Now, is this a good plan? Is this a good strategy? It is a good strategy. But there are a lot of companies out there right now that have a managed service offering. And you know what? It's a commodity offering. It's not the high-value, discontinuous consulting offering with a high margin. No, it's a low-margin offering that represents a predictable revenue stream, which is still good because there's not ups and downs, so it creates financial stability. But the key is, how do you sell it? How do you sell managed services? And that is what resellers have not figured out. Resellers don't have a differentiating factor over here. They have it over here, where there's consulting, where there's discontinuous innovation. Once we get over here to recurring revenue and managed services, we're in a commodity space again because we're largely managing commodity products. So who's going to take that business? Are the larger resellers going to reach down and grab hold of the mid-market? Are companies like Dell going to do that, or large resellers? They absolutely are, because there's a lot of managed services business to be had there, and the margin is consistent and stable. So if a company can afford to get in there and grab that business, they will grab it. Now, what is the small reseller going to do? Nobody's saying this. The distributors aren't saying it. The manufacturers aren't saying it. They're not letting the small reseller realize that the margins are getting thinner and the discontinuous innovation is over. And I have this theory that discontinuous innovation is over for a period of time. Data center with Cisco represents capturing new market, not discontinuous innovation. Stealing margin or stealing product business from HP and from Sun and from IBM and other organizations that sell servers and storage to repopulate large data centers, to consolidate it, to go to virtualization. But this is not discontinuous innovation. And this is a place that the SMB and mid-market reseller will not be able to play. So what's going to happen to your business? It's likely going to go out of business unless you build a strategy that allows you to build that recurring revenue managed service pipeline, build the valuation of the company, and hope to be sold to a larger organization that wants to pick up the market that you've captured. If you don't do something to change your approach, to put your value into consulting and managed services, you're going to be in huge, huge trouble. Product install is over. And I suspect that the innovation period, that 20 years of innovation that we've just been through that went from 1980 up through the year 2000 is over. And that we're entering into a phase where technology gets improved on, stabilized, and market share is stolen back and forth between large companies that can afford to put the technology in there at low margin. This is the future of computing for the next several years. How long will it last? I have no idea. But I know this, if your company can't sustain that period of time because they've got a stable base of recurring revenue built, you're going to be in trouble. You've got to listen to this. And it's not being said from the manufacturer, and it's not coming from the distributor. So who's going to say it? Well, here I am. I'm giving you the message. You've got to change the approach. So don't sit down and think things are just going to come back. The economy's just going to restore. It's not. It's not in the reseller business unless you take steps of action to rebrand yourself and get into a compelling market space. Thanks again. This is Dave Stelzl. This is the history of the VAR, or the VAR is history. We need to take action.